Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, we've got a jam-packed show for you this evening. We're going to be giving you live debate coverage in our Mystery Science Theater style. That'll be going live at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. David Knight, Joe Biggs, Darren McBreen, and the rest of the crew will be joining us. Be sure to tweet us out your questions using the hashtag GOP debate. And, you know, it's always fun interacting with you guys live in real time. Then we've also got a really important interview coming up later on in the show. David Knight spoke with the director of a new documentary, Killing Ed. Now, we've all heard about, you know, the socialism that's being pushed in public schools as well as universities. But what about Islamic State? That's right. We're going to talk to you about the connection between the largest charter school in the United States and their ties to the Islamic State. So that's going to be coming up later in the show. Very important. But first, we've been witnessing all of these racially charged campaigns and protests across universities throughout the nation. There's no room for civil disagreement. They say confess to wrongdoing or else. You can only respect the student body by validating their subjective feelings. Well, now we have the Missouri University Police Department kind of falling in line with this. They're sending out an email to students today saying, call them and report any hurtful speech that they encounter on the campus. And they also suggest that students provide a detailed description of the offender, their location or license plate number, even take a picture if possible. Now, the MUPD readily admits that hurtful or hateful speech is not against the law, but they write, if the individuals identified are students, then the Office of Student Conduct can take disciplinary action. That's right, you can't say words that hurt there on college campuses anymore. So when asked about the potential First Amendment implications for this, a spokesman responded saying, we are just simply asking them to report what they feel is hurtful and or hateful speech. So it'll be very interesting to see what sort of disciplinary action will be taken. Jakari Jackson will be reporting from Missouri. I hope to get his take on the whole situation later. But basically, universities now are breeding ground for homogenous thought. Students are rarely going to encounter any diverse viewpoints. So this is obviously a huge failure of the system. It's going to be a huge failure for American democracy. Instead of producing the next generation of intellectuals, they're churning out crazed cult members who are totally against the First Amendment.
Progressives and social justice warriors have launched an ideological jihad against free speech and the very bedrock of what education is supposed to represent. Free thinking, logic, debate, dissent, open inquiry. Under their new regime of safe spaces, trigger warnings, and the right not to be offended, the intolerant regressive left has targeted all these things for abolition. At universities across America, administrators agreed to literally rip up copies of the Constitution because it triggered investigators who were posing as students.
I'm happy to, yeah.
Okay. At Yale, a professor was surrounded by a hysterical mob who used Maoist Red Guard tactics to intimidate and shout him down.
The exception is because other people have rights too, not just you.
Unsafe space here. We're
I
all
did
supposed
not-
to be quiet.
No, I don't agree with that.
Then why the fuck did you accept the position?
Because
Who
I have
the
a
fuck hired you?
I have a different
You
vision
should
than you.
step down. If that is what you think about being a master, you should step down. It is not about creating an intellectual space.
His hate crime? Writing an email critical of the students' efforts to censor offensive Halloween costumes. At Missouri University, President Tim Wolf and others were forced to resign in part for not acknowledging their white privilege and refusing to echo the debunked narrative behind the Michael Brown shooting. Radicals and professors then openly called for using mob violence to silence the First Amendment right of the press to cover the story.
Hi, media. Can I talk to you?
No, you need to get out. You need to get out.
No, I don't.
You need to get out.
I actually don't.
All right. Hey, who wants to help me get this reporter out of here? I need some muscle over here.
First Amendment that protects you standing here. Walking forward. I'm walking forward. You're pushing me.
A university in the UK arranged a conference on censorship, then censored conservatives from taking part because it might offend someone.
Feelings are more important than facts.
Yeah!
This is wrong. You're all crazy.
Stop violating me with your different opinions.
I have the right to speak my mind.
No, we have the right not to be offended.
For years, people have played down the threat posed by SJWs to free speech. Oh, they're only dumb teenagers on Tumblr, just ignore them, they'll go away. This past week has completely demolished that naive assumption. These people will be teaching our children. They'll be in government with the full force of the state behind them. Now even liberal professors are admitting that they're frightened of their own students' zealotry. Instead of producing the next generation of intellectuals, these universities are churning out crazed cult members who have declared war on free speech. This is not going to end well for society, and unless actual liberals stand up for true intellectual tolerance and authentic classical liberalism, the future for free speech in the West is doomed.
Well, Obama's calls for amnesty have taken another hit today. Federal judges say that they used Obama's own words to halt deportation amnesty. This is an opinion freighted with meaning for the separation of powers battles. The judges writing, they singled out Mr. Obama's own claim that he acted to rewrite the law because Congress wouldn't pass the bill he wanted. Now, you'll recall in 2014, Obama said this in response to a heckler who was scolding him for boosting deportations. He said, "But what you're not paying attention to is the fact that I just took an action to change the law." And the two judges said that the Justice Department failed to explain away Mr. Obama's remarks. And the court ruled that not only didn't he follow the usual rules in making a major policy change, but that his claims of power to grant tentative legal status to a massive class of people went beyond the waiver powers Congress granted him in the law. So this is a 2-to-1 ruling, basically reaffirming that the president must carry out the laws and he doesn't have blanket powers to waive them.
President Obama was dealt another uppercut of justice concerning the socialist administration's unrelenting push to flood America with grateful voters rewarded with work permits for their allegiance.
So sue me. As long as they're doing nothing, I'm not going to apologize for trying to do something.
The 2-to-1 ruling highlights a separations of power battle win in the face of Obama's dictatorial executive powers. Judge Jerry E. Smith used Obama's own words from a speech given in Chicago in 2014.
I understand you may disagree, but we've got to be able to talk honestly about these issues, all right? Now, you're absolutely right that there have been significant numbers of deportations. That's true. But what you're not paying attention to is the fact that I just took an action to change the law. Now, so that's point number one.
On the chopping block is an amnesty of regulations within the Immigration and Nationalities Act, allowing Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson to waive penalties. The Washington Times reports it would allow illegal immigrants to stay, granting them work permits, which then entitle them to Social Security cards, tax credits, and state driver's licenses. 5 million illegal immigrants under DAPA would then be given a 3-year stay of deportation and work permits. Obama's hubris was in full display as the court ruled that he not only didn't follow the usual rules in making a major policy change, but that his claims of power to grant tentative legal status to a massive class of people went beyond the waiver powers Congress granted him in the law. Now, the New York Times reports President Obama will ask the Supreme Court to clear the way for his long-delayed immigration overhaul, according to administration lawyers, setting up another high-stakes legal contest in the nation's highest court over the fate of one of the president's signature achievements. The Department of Justice, who couldn't come up with a convincing argument to legitimize President Obama's dictatorial comments from 2014, is appealing the Fifth Circuit of Appeals ruling and seeks further review from the Supreme Court, the same court that recently saved Obama's healthcare system and middle-class destroying Obamacare.
All we're saying is we're not going to deport you.
A prime example of the intensity of Obama's war on the United States naturalization and voting process is one Rosa Maria Ortega, an illegal immigrant residing in Grand Prairie, Texas. Ortega has committed voter fraud, a second-degree felony, repeatedly. Attorney General Ken Paxton's office is working with the Tarrant County criminal DA Sharon Wilson on Ortega's case. But meanwhile, Texas Democrats are engaged in a political witch hunt to prosecute Attorney General Ken Paxton of securities fraud. As Trump's anti-immigration rhetoric raises his status in the polls and the raping of children and other nefarious activity goes unreported by bought and paid-for media, President Obama thumbs his nose at the will of the American people and moves forward on dangerous policies aimed at transforming the United States into a third-world tyranny. John Bound for Infowars.com.
Well, Donald Trump says that Hillary is running for a lot of reasons, one of them being so that she can stay out of jail. So Trump has now repeatedly said that Clinton belongs in jail for running her State Department emails through a private address on a secret server that even the president didn't know existed. Now, of course, this is pretty good news. It should be entertaining tonight. We should start to see the gloves come off, at least between the candidates. Of course, we're not going to be seeing any mainstream media calling out Hillary for her blatant lies. Once again, she repeated the statement that she never tried to blame the Benghazi attack on a video. But of course, with the leak of her emails, we know that that is a lie. We saw her scrambling in those first hours to pin the Benghazi attack on this video, working with some officials there in the State Department to make that happen. But the mainstream media just let that slide when that email surfaced. They let it slide. They're not going to call her out on that because they don't really, it's their job to propagandize against the Republicans. So just like kind of how they're doing with Ben Carson. Obviously, he is the GOP frontrunner, depending on what poll you look at. So now they are on a witch hunt with him. Last week, Politico ran the headline, Ben Carson admits fabricating West Point scholarship. But in fact, his campaign did no such thing. Now, this is a discrepancy over a claim that Carson made in his autobiography. He said that he was offered a full scholarship to West Point, but rejected it in favor of becoming a doctor. Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about that. David Knight is certainly going to be fired up about Ben Carson later on in the show. Well, what Carson's campaign manager said to Politico in an email says, Dr. Carson was the top ROTC student in the city of Detroit. In that role, he was invited to meet General Westmoreland. He believes it was at a banquet. He can't remember with specificity their brief conversation, but it centered around Dr. Carson's performance as ROTC City Executive Officer. He was introduced to some folks from West Point by his ROTC supervisors. They told him they could get him an appointment based on his grades. He considered it, but in the end, he did not seek admission. So Politico editorialized it saying, when presented with this evidence, Carson's campaign conceded the story was false. And they did not concede the story was false. They're basically explaining this is kind of what he meant. And you know what? The media did not call out Obama after the fact when it was proven that he had tons of lies in his biography. That's just not what they do. So Ben Shapiro broke this story that this fabrication was in fact on part of Politico, and then Politico was forced to alter their headline and issue an embarrassing editor's note. So you can always count on the media to propagandize against Republicans, even if Carson is making some outrageous claims. David Knight is going to certainly be fired up about Ben Carson tonight, so you want to be sure to get his commentary on that. So it'll be very interesting to see how tonight's moderators handle this debate. They're going to be focusing on the economy, their tax plans, and other topics. We are going to be here live, crashing through the lies in real time. Be sure to tweet us at RealAlexJones. Use the hashtag GOP debate. We love interacting with you, and we'll love to answer a lot of your questions. So we'll all be here live, crashing through the lies in real time. Now, we've got a highlight reel coming up for you from, some of the previous debates and all of their crappy questions that they were asked. Do you think they're going to be asking some real good questions this time, getting to the bottom of what's going on here within our country? Why don't you tweet us the questions you would like to ask these presidential candidates, and we'll be sure to read them live on the air using the hashtag GOP debate. We'll be right back after this.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Vote for Jeb, or you're just fucking stupid.
Fool me, we can't get fooled again.
You traitors claiming I'm a Ruski agent, say it to my face and I'll break your nose. I'm sick of it. I will stomp your head in the ground, you traitorous maggots, while we go under Obamacare, North American Union, conquered by European banks, announcing our kids don't belong to us, total bondage, total surveillance, and you want to shoot your mouth off about me being a Ruski agent. I will stomp your head in the ground.
Never water yourself down just because someone can't handle you at 100 proof. It's the Alex Jones Show, because there's a war on for your mind.
I wish we could go back to the days, I'm telling you, of just getting my satisfaction out in the street. You pick a sword or something else, you're going out in the street. I'm not kidding, you cowardly stuff. The globalist social engineers are not just targeting us with propaganda. They are manipulating our genetics. We are being targeted at every level by estrogen mimickers that lower our testosterone and other hormones and natural compounds that the body needs, sourced from powerful organic herbs, and then concentrated for maximum potency. Super male vitality was developed to activate your body's own natural processes. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today to secure your super male vitality.